Hello, and today's video. So again, we're still on the topic of simplifying radicals, and we need to again work on some vocabulary before we jump right in and start simplifying. So let's add a few more words to our vocabulary. Okay, so in the last video, I showed you this list of vocabulary words, and we've covered a couple of them. So we have talked about already what a perfect square is. And again, remember I told you you needed to know the first 20, for sure the first 15, but to record the first 20. And we also talked about what made something a square root. Remember we said I have the square root of 64. I know that it is 8 because 8 squared is 64. Okay, and so again, our definition of square roots. So now we're going to go ahead and talk about the radical, radicand, index, and then go into fractional exponents. Okay, so what you see on this slide is a list of, or examples of symbols that you need to, again, know. And so let's just start with the most basic symbol, and that is the symbol up here. And guys, one of the things that I hear kids say a lot is, let's say I give you this here, and kids will say, well, it's radical 9, okay? And that's really not how you should be saying this. That is the square root of 9, not radical 9. Again, guys, when you look at this symbol, the symbol itself here, okay, this symbol is the radical symbol. Okay, it's called the radical. That's what it's called. Okay, it's kind of like this is called the multiplication symbol. This is called the division symbol. You know, these are parentheses. They are grouping symbols. Those are, it is just a symbol. Okay, now what that symbol means then is according to what is in this location here, which is called the index. Okay, so if, as this first one here is, where there is nothing in this area, okay, we don't write anything there. Technically, if there's nothing written there, but there's a number underneath it, okay, it is understood to be the square root, okay? And the square root is the only one that we don't write the symbol on. So if I say just what is the symbol, it is called the radical. But if I ask you what this is with maybe the number 16 under it, then that is the square root symbol. Okay, so be sure you do know the difference in the two. Okay, so again, when I look at this index here is understood to be a 2. Now the 16, the name of it is called the radicand. R-A-D-I. Lost my train of thought on how to spell it. Okay, it's called the radicand. So what's inside is called the radicand. The number outside is called the index, and the symbol is called the radical. Okay, and so again, on the square root of 16, that's how we would write that. Again, if you put this 2 there, I wouldn't count it wrong by any means, but it's not necessary. Okay, now I'm going to also share with you what I talked about as being one of our vocabulary words, which is called rational exponents. Okay, whoops, let me get back my thing. Okay, rational exponents. Now, rational numbers are any number that you can write as a fraction. So when I say a rational exponent, what I'm really meaning is we're going to be writing it as a fraction. That's what I'm telling you there. So when we write a square root as a rational exponent, now you got to pay attention to this, and then we'll again fill this in. When you see this, I'm going to be talking about things that are called the power or the exponent, the index, the root, so forth. But on this, okay, since this 16 is to the first power, understood because there's no power there, and this here, or exponent, if you want to call it that, and this is an understood 2. Another way of writing the square root of 16 is to write it as 16 to the 1/2 power. So anytime you see anything to the 1/2 power, it simply means the square root of 16. So as we continue on, we're actually going to write equations. You know, we'll write equations that are x squared equals 9, and you have to solve it. But I could also write to the 1/2 equals some number, or I could write this as the square root of x equals some number. And these two things mean the same thing. They mean the same thing. So if I said to rewrite the square root of something as a rational exponent, you would write it as 1/2. Now, what I like to say is that we write it with the power over the root. Okay, so that's power over root. Some people like writing it as exponent over index. I like power over root. Okay, so you'll hear me refer to that, power over root. Okay, now that's 16, and that's square root. Now let's do another one here. This is cube root. So if I want to do the cube root of a number, let me give you an example. A very easy one to do is the cube root of 8. Now what cube root means, remember square root meant, is that s squared has to equal r. Okay, so this number was 4, and it's 4 because 4 squared is 16. So when I do cube root of 8, what I'm asking for is what number times itself 3 times will give me 8. Okay, and this is the number 2. Okay, and this is true because 2 cubed is 8. Okay, you see how that works? That's a cube root. So the rational exponent for a cube root, again, this power is 1, so it would be 8 to the 1/3 power. So when we start doing cube roots, 1/3 power means the same thing as the cube root. And again, you're going to have to know all of these. So think about then what the 4th root would be. Okay, and let's do the 4th root of 16. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you is what number times itself 4 times, okay, 4 times will give you 16. And remember, since it's times itself 4 times, it's going to have to be a fairly small number. Well, it is the number 2. And that is true because 2 to the 4th power is 16. Do you see how that works? It's the same thing as the square root. I'm going to take off of this stuff up here just because it's kind of in my way. Okay? So my next question to you is then, what would be the rational exponent for the 4th root? So I would write it as 16 to the 1/4. See how that works? Again, because this is the number 1. Now we're going to change that. That number is not always going to be 1. Okay? So if that exponent is not 1, then that number on the top would not be 1. Okay? Let's try one more. This is the nth root. Why I say nth root is meaning any root. I could be the 5th root, the 6th root, 7th root, so forth. Any root, what would it be? Okay? So a lot of times what we do is we put an x in here just so, since I didn't put a number in there. Okay? So the nth root, if there's no power, it would be x to the 1/n. So that's a generic way of writing any root. Okay? Does that make sense to you? Hopefully it does, because you're going to see this. Those of you who are going on higher math, especially when you get into calculus, when you get to calculus, you'll see the fact that we don't write the radical symbol much. We actually use the rational exponent more than we do the radical. Okay? So you're going to have to get very familiar with that. Okay. So hopefully just notation is all this is over. Hopefully that made sense to you, and you can answer some questions over that.